Very good. Well, let's get started. My name is Henk Mulder. I work for IATA in charge of digital cargo.
Juan Iván Martín, Head of Innovation for Financial and Distribution Services. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank you to our YouTube followers too, to connect to this session that is being broadcasted live too, so that we could expand a bit the reach of the session.
Yeah, mostly us. Sorry about you, but you know, they're going to have to look at us. But whatever you have to say, we'll make sure that they hear about it. What are we going to do today?
So today, it's probably one of many series of meetings where we would like to open up a little bit our innovation kind of ecosystem or network. We believe that our industry is very innovative, that a lot of things have been done for many years. Now we're reaching a point where a lot of technologies are booming, a lot of things are happening. And we believe that by opening up and talking to a larger audience, probably it's the way to, first of all, cover more land, because there is so much you can do on your own. But secondly, finding solutions. There is a lot about sharing and a lot about building things together. That some of the topics we're going to touch on today.
Also, I think that within IATA and with our IATA members, we have these conversations all the time. And it's actually really nice to talk to some new people. People from around the area who may be working in other parts of the business or are new to the business, and to get your ideas and to see what you guys are doing. So we'll make it very interactive. We have some stuff we want to talk about. We'll do a bit of an introduction in a minute about aviation and about IATA, and then we're going to touch on some subjects. And as I said, it'll be interactive, and I actually look forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Very well. So let's start this. So first, we're going to show you...
This is when I get out of the way, right? Okay.
We're going to show you a little video that we just published.
I am Alexandre de Juniac, Director General and CEO of IATA. I would like to introduce you to aviation, the business of freedom.
Flying is essential. Every day, 11 million people and 140,000 tons of cargo travel by air. Aviation reunites families and loved ones. It opens up a whole world of exploration, knowledge, and adventure. It encourages the exchange of ideas, develops markets, links economies. It enriches lives, creates millions of jobs around the globe, and carries vital supplies to those in need. For over 7 decades, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, has built the global standards that enable airlines to connect the world. We partner with our member airlines to make flying even safer, more secure and efficient, while committing to the highest standards of sustainability, including halving aviation's carbon emissions by 2050. Passengers, airlines and agents depend on our financial systems to buy and sell tickets globally, while our standards for e-tickets, web check-in, airport kiosks and other self-service conveniences save travelers time and put them in control of their journey. We are a strong voice for sustaining the benefits of aviation through smarter regulation, fairer taxation, cost-efficient infrastructure, and borders that are open to people and trade. Aviation is the business of freedom, and over the next 2 decades, demand for the freedom to fly will double. Our mission is to prepare for that future by representing, leading, and serving the airline industry, to make flying safer, more efficient, and sustainable, and help our members connect and enrich the world.
All right. So welcome to our executive office here in Geneva. You've seen this quick video. I think we'll just give you a few more minutes on what IATA is and what we do. So overall,
the
IATA
ideal process flow demonstrates how key parts of a passenger's journey can be automated.
IATA is a trade association representing 270 plus airlines around the world. We represent 83, 85, I don't know what the latest number is, of the passenger volume worldwide. So we don't have all the carriers, but we still have most of the volume. And well, we have a number of divisions, a number of functions. So at the heart of IATA, we still have the standards, right? So the association was created because the airlines had commonality and they needed to find solution and standardization to a number of problems. And this is how the association came about. Today we share a lot of the services around their financial services, around the cargo area that Hank is covering. We do lobbying, we still create standards, coding, a number of things that you've seen in the video. What else do we do in IATA?
This goes back a long time. The very first IATA is from the 20s. And there were a few wars and everything, and after the war, IATA was recreated. And initially, the problems were very different. You know, to try and create a global network was a big effort. Now, of course, with IT, the global networks are easy, but with it, the complexity has increased as well. So our focus has shifted over time, which is why we're here, right? To find out where should we move next, where's the next innovation. But at all times, since the invention of flying, we've tried to innovate and keep things going and moving forward.
Absolutely. I'm just sharing with you a few numbers in the back, but we see that this is a very large industry. It's growing very fast. I think just to give you some rough numbers, that this is doubling up every 15 years, right? So the number of passengers around the world are booming. Some areas are already very mature, but the growth is coming from some areas of high growth demographics, but also from a social, economical standpoint. More and more people are now able to fly because they have more purchasing power, also because flying is being cheaper and cheaper, as you know, right? So a lot of things are happening. We have a lot of different initiatives going on in the industry. We support directly more than 62 million jobs. Indirectly, I believe is 2.3 trillion. I think it's the figure.
It's actually the travel and tourism industry in the world is 10% of the global economy. It's huge.
It's
very big part.
It's pretty huge.
Yeah.
So overall, I mean, we are very much happy to be part of this industry, but it is very difficult to change things because it's so big and it's so complex, right? So whenever you want to steer things in a certain direction, probably there are many things that need to be broken, right? And this mindset is often difficult to manage, and it prevents us to a certain extent to go faster, even though we tried quite a few things, don't we?
Well, we have to go faster because to keep up with the growth. People want to travel more and more. The global economy, in a way, globalization has been facilitated and more or less created through aviation. If we didn't have aviation, we would not have a global economy, at least not the one we live in today. But it's growing so fast that to keep up with innovation is a very big headache for a lot of people. So you see some numbers here, 20%, what was the last one? 20?
Cargo, yeah.
20 million parcels sent every day. Some days, like for example, Singles Day in China, I think it's something like $20 billion being sold in online, in e-commerce just in one single day. The e-commerce is growing so fast that by the year 2020, we're expecting $3.5 trillion in turnover. That is roughly the size of an economy of a very big country. Not quite the US yet, but you're getting towards Russia size. Okay, so that's significant change also in the way that the economy is functioning and the role of air freight in that particular environment.
So overall, many things going on, and I'm going to show you all the little slides that we have, but many things going. Some of you are already from the industry. I've seen some of the participants from Swissport and from CETA, from different consulting firms, and some of you are a bit more alien to the industry. And this is all great. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody perceives kind of the value of traveling. So even at the personal level of this cargo, right? So if you take any other room or in your houses, most of the things that you have around have been at some given time transported by an aircraft, right? So imagine how life was before the invention of aviation 100 years ago, where the average speed of the human kind was like 5 kilometers. That was the average speed for transportation around the world. And with the invention of aviation, things have speed up dramatically. A lot of the things that we have today worldwide, we often forget about the dream, right? How the fact that you can just go to the other side of the world in 10, 12 hours, that is just unbelievable. We tend to forget that, but it has a huge and deep impact in our lifestyle, in our society in general, in the economy.
Yeah, that's right. And we expect it now, right? It's an expectation that it all works.
It is an expectation, indeed. We need to be always on. So let me show you some of the things we're looking into from the industry. This is kind of the innovation radar. There are so many things going on, as I said before. We'll not cover all of them. It's kind of little flowers here, but there is a lot of topics that are happening today. Some are like mega trends, so you know what's going on with the Uberization or sharing economy, what's going on with big data, Internet of Things, gadgets, you know. And all of them, we tend to rely to some of these key topics that are in the center. So we do a lot of things about digital trust. We believe that the digitization of the industry requires also digitization of the standards and the services and the platforms that we have underneath. There is a lot about platform economy, where a lot of business now is done in a different way. So the process and the business flows are evolving, so we're looking into that. Business intelligence, this is one of the areas that IATA is already covering, where we play a role in having access to all this data and distributing it to the different partners. So we believe there is still more to be done. There is a dimension around intelligent vehicles. This is a big trend. There is a lot of things going on. We'll cover in a second part of it, but where we see that a lot of more automation is going on, not only in aviation, but cars or trains and things like that. So we're really looking into that. New travel, so alternative forms of traveling, the hyperloops of the world. I mean, there are other alternatives competing, so to speak, with air transportation, or they are maybe synergetic, depending on the thing. We have had for many years. We have the TGV, the Shinkansen, so some of them are not really new, but still, we're monitoring what's going on, what is the impact in the industry. And then finally, digital customers. So the customers and the customers' expectations and behavior are changing also a lot. So we need to be conscious of that. Because yes, we're working for the member airlines, but ultimately we are flying passengers, cargo, and we need to make sure that we understand what the demand is and where things are going. Did I cover it all?
Yeah, I think you did. And does anything like here pops up and goes like, well, hang on, this is something that I'm specializing in or something I'm particularly focusing on? If not, I will find out in a minute what you are doing.
This is the moment where our YouTube followers ask us, is there anyone in the room?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, now the other thing. Okay, good.
Let me maybe hold up my mirror or something
Exactly,
just to
we
prove
can see
it.
it.
Okay.
So
let's look at some specifics, right?
Sure. So we're gonna deep dive into 4 of those. Share with you a bit our views, what we're doing, things that are happening. I'd like to very much have your views on those. At the end of the session, we'll propose to you to do a quick survey to see which one of those technologies do you think are going to impact most our industry. Just to have a little steering probably for next session, right? If you say, well, this is the most hot topic, then probably this will incline us towards that in the next iteration. So let's start with the first one.
All right, drones. Who owns a drone? Just out of curiosity. 1 drone, 2 drones, 3 drones, 4 drones.
4
Okay.
drones. Good.
Brilliant. These are this variety here. You know, this is the sort of the drone you can play around with. It's also the drones that are causing a lot of issues around airports. And in some airports, they're training hawks to take down your drone. So aside from risking fines and maybe imprisonment, you might even lose your drone if you go anywhere near an airplane. And accidents does happen. So it's one of the areas where some of our colleagues in safety are focusing on how do we manage, how do we regulate the use of drones. Sure. Then we have drones for humanitarian. In Africa, they use drones to deliver medication, for example, to remote areas. And that's taking off really well because these are really, really cheap drones. I mean, the drone you see here in the image probably only costs a couple of $100. And they can be operated by anyone really, including medical staff, for example, in areas where they have medical centers. A lot of development there and a lot of progress. Drones for parcel delivery. A lot of experimentation going on with that. I'm sure you've seen some of the YouTube videos, and certainly the YouTubers will have seen them. And I'm assuming that the rest of you are also YouTubers, except you're sitting in the room here. And there's some really cool stuff going on. Again, very often it's to get to locations where you can't get to otherwise very easily, which could be remote or actually in the center of cities as well. Then we have these enormous drones that are being developed. Like this drone here on the bottom of the screen left is a drone that can carry 2 tons. can travel 1,200 kilometers. And they're being developed for remote regions, for example, in Canada, where during the winter some of the roads are cut off. You can't actually get to communities. There's one drone developer that worked out a drone delivery system for things like vegetables and chickens. And a chicken in some of the remote areas of Canada in the winter will cost them around $100. So actually it's worth developing a drone and to sell it for $25. Okay, so then you eat chicken over there. So a lot of work on that. There is an issue, of course, with drones, and it is that typically they're unmanned. That's why they're drones. And the civil aviation authorities aren't too happy about that. They like the idea of a pilot in a plane that can actually decide where the plane goes and change direction if there's a problem. And so, although you can develop drones that fly perfectly all right with artificial intelligence, it doesn't mean that they get the authority to fly. So in remote regions, they can sort of get away with it, but certainly in areas like this around Geneva, you're not likely to see a drone like that in the near future, because it would simply be too dangerous. Similar story for passenger drones. A lot of them have been developed. They fly, they work, you can put a passenger in it, except you're not allowed to do it yet. So the technology is there, but the legal environment doesn't quite support it yet, to the point where they're desperate to put the passenger and actually try it out, but there are some limitations around it, but the drones are there. And then the last one, application of drones, in this case it's a drone at an airport that is checking the state of the runway to see if there are any problems there, if there are holes, if there are birds. Similarly, on the rail side, of course, outside aviation, in the United States, the rail operators have received the authority from the civil aviation authorities to operate drones above the rail tracks. They're their tracks. Okay, so they actually control the tracks. And these drones are flying there every day, checking the state of the tracks in remote areas to see if there's problems there. Really cool applications, and they're flying there as we speak. So a lot of good stuff. And from IATA's perspective, we sort of track this stuff, see what's going on, try and understand if this is going to impact traditional aviation. Of course, this is aviation too, but it's a little bit different from the usual aviation when we put a pilot in a plane with some passengers and some cargo. So new area, a lot of development, a lot of innovation, and we need to see how this is going to impact aviation. Now, we had some drone operators in the room here. Any reactions to this? You see any other applications than the one that you're seeing on the screen here? You have some ideas, perhaps?
Well, aircraft needs to be checked before every
inspections.
Well, so it would be the same as for the runway. You can have different checks, or like firefighting within an airport could also be part of the drones. So actually quite many variants of the same things you see here would apply, in my opinion.
And they do. Yeah. They actually do that.
They actually do. We've seen aircraft manufacturers already delivering that themselves, so that you can buy an aircraft and they will give you this system to scan the status, especially if the aircraft has been hit by a storm or something, where maybe depending on the size of the aircraft you will spend anything around 70 hours to inspect it, and with the drone this will be 5. So there is a lot of direct return on investment, if I will, for some specific use cases like this one.
They're also looking at drones actually in warehouses to basically start moving things around in a warehouse. I have to admit that the warehouse people are a bit worried about it. The idea of having all these swarms of drones flying around with packages over your head is not something that is very enticing, but human mind will invent anything and try it out and make it work somehow.
I think you touched on a very good point. I mean, of course, IATA is doing great things to regulate and prevent the loss of life. We don't want a collision, of course, so it needs to be regulated. So great work done on the educational side. So when you buy a drone, you should know, what are the rules, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Regulation is not standard, let's say, so in some countries it's a bit different. In the case of Switzerland, don't fly them closer than 5 kilometers around the perimeter of them. These kind of rules are key and vital, and we are playing a role there to make sure that this is going through. Now, what is interesting for me from a technological standpoint is drones is a combination of different technologies that are very interesting, right? So first you have, those things are electrical, right? Whereas most of our aircraft today are consuming fuel, right? So how could we learn from that, or how could this investment, because this is booming, there are a lot of investors. How could that have a positive impact on traditional aircraft? There is something about, you mentioned unmanned, so sensors or automation, to which extent this is good. I know that pilots, true pilots, they know that the sense of awareness that you have when you're in the cockpit cannot be easily replaced by a machine. And I totally get that, and there are very good reasons from a safety perspective why this is like that today, right? Imagine in the future that tell you there is not a pilot in the airplane. Well, many of us will feel a bit insecure, right? So there are very good reasons why this is happening. Now, the other dimension is vertical takeoff and landing. A lot of those things are taking off like that, not like that, right? So what if this could be applied to other aircraft? What would be the impact from an infrastructure perspective? We have a big issue in the industry that because this is growing so fast, that the infrastructure in many places, it's going to be saturated, cannot cope. So what if this is the key again to find other ways of address this market? So you see, if we break it down into different technologies, maybe some of us perceive this as a toy, something like that, but if you break it down like that, then it could be applied to the bigger aircraft, right, and to many other things. Not to say that you have already big drones, right?
Yeah, and actually some of them, and I think this one in particular, I don't even think it's autonomous, it's remotely controlled. So some guy that gets up in the morning, goes to the office and starts flying pilots from his planes from his office, and then goes for lunch while his colleague takes over, and they fly him around like that. So it's not all autonomous.
It's a remote pilot.
Remote pilot, but then of course there are some issues with distance in terms of connectivity and stuff. Yes?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the word regulation before, and I think with transport of goods, the need for regulation in terms of safety is not as strict as if you transported living human passengers. And I had a very interesting conversation some months ago with your colleague Celine from the cargo department. She talked about drones. I thought it was the little toys there, but then she said that can be up to 100 tons of aircraft weight, so really substantial transport. And these could be implemented much faster than in the cargo area than for passengers, because there have to be regulations that have to be met, but it can be in, let's say, a test field before the same technology is implemented in the passenger area, and in a sense it would accelerate the speed of innovation also towards passenger aircraft.
That's a good point. And those ones you refer to, sort of the 100 tons ones, they're actually airships.
Yeah.
They're literally just like the old Zeppelins, except that they don't explode, theoretically at least. But they can carry almost any tonnage, but they can be operated remotely as well. So, good point. All right, what do you think? Shall we look at the next area, perhaps?
Sure, then we can recap on that. So the next one is about artificial intelligence. So here we have a few examples.
All right, one after the other. So traditionally, the air navigation is already full of AI in the optimization of routes and in managing all of the traffic that comes in. And in fact, AI, although right now you hear a lot about it in the news, it's been around for 50, 60 years. The first AI was proposed in the 50s, if not the 40s. I think it was the 50s. But we didn't have the computing power to really make it work. So in some areas, like air navigation, they have been using this for the last 30, 40 years already, using the computing power that they had in order to manage the air navigation. We have some other, if you want, you can go through them all. This is an airport, and I believe that this is an application by another organization that works in air freight or in aviation. They have developed an AI that's capable of predicting where flight delays are going to be before they've taken place. They look at the weather, they look at the history, they look at everything, and they use that to assign gates. So when an aircraft comes in, it needs a gate in order to let the passengers off. But if it's going to be late by 2 hours, they may as well use it for some other aircraft. So although the aircraft may have been designated a certain slot, they're going to predict that it's not going to be there and use it for something else and optimize the use of the airport. Very, very clever approach to using AI. This company, Singapore Airlines, it's on the screen, so I might well say it.
It's public information.
Public information. They used AI in order to analyze their customer data. And as they were doing that, there's lots of things you can do with AI, and one of them is to discover patterns in your data that you didn't know existed. And these people, they discovered a new market segment that they didn't know about. I mean, they knew about the professionals, the business travelers, the students, the retirees, they knew about all of that. But here was some traffic from Asia to Australia. And they did a bit of digging around, and they found there were grown-up hippies that were retiring and had very specific traffic flows going back to their youth and probably smoking whatever they want to smoke in these remote locations in Australia. But they discovered it using AI. And then, of course, once you know that, you can make a product that is specifically targeted at those customers. So a very interesting use of AI.
This use case it's often the case. So sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? So when you plug all your data into an AI, you know, it's way clever than our brain, right? So it can find patterns and
our
things.
brain, yeah.
Well, not ours, but you know. But absolutely. I mean, and this is always, people struggle with that, no? I said, but machines cannot replace it, not for certain things, but if I ask anyone in the room what is the square root of 2,000,004, some of you might be able to pull it out, but it's going to take you, a few days to do the calculations, right? Whereas if you use a computer,
4,342.
yeah, exactly. That's all.
Could somebody check that, please?
All right, more use cases. This is from another carrier. Those are booming. So this is the chatbot thing, right? So this is how can you use it for customer service experience? How can you automate to a certain extent a number of queries, right? Airlines are doing it. I remember IATA doing this 10 years ago probably, when you have Anna, very nice, and you could ask her things. If the challenge was to write properly the name of the furniture, right? Because it's not always Struchenbach, and it's difficult. But overall, it worked already. It can learn now about previous queries. They know that a lot of people, when there is a disruption, they are contacting you for the same thing. So there can be a manual intervention if need be, saying, look, this is the official position, this is the answer, and then you can answer faster your customers, right? So then you go into the machine learning part, which is very interesting, where the machine can also learn and provide answers directly to new questions, right? And this is where the discussion comes from artificial intelligence. Where do you let go, and to which extent you're comfortable having a machine taking somehow the control on answering some things? Because when it's it's a bit like the discussion on the Skynet, right? So when do you give the control to the machine, then what happens? And there is a little bit of that, but for the time being, chatbots are nice.
Yeah, they work.
They work.
And they allow companies also to predict the amount of time you have to wait. Because they know the machine can handle as many tweets and posts as you want. So they can limit the time to respond, which is quite good for the customer. Then of course, if it's a complicated case, I'll hand it off to a real human being. Some others I mentioned, flight routes. The optimization of flight routes is incredibly complicated. They are dynamic. They're not always the same. They change all the time. It could be a war situation where you have to go around the country and all of a sudden you have to reroute.
Volcano eruption.
Volcanic eruption.
Those type of things.
It could be a strike in the country, although in fairness, we don't change the routes for that, we just fly around it. So AI has been used in that area for a long time as well. This is one of my favorites. There's a low-cost carrier in Geneva which flies orange planes. And as you know, you have to buy your own food when you fly with this low-cost carrier. And they have created this AI that actually looks at the buying patterns of their customers. And they know per flight, per day, per time of year, exactly what should go in their trolley in order to satisfy demand. And that can change from 1 hour to another. You know, it could be that at the 9 o'clock flight they need a lot of sandwiches and Mars bars, whereas the 11 o'clock flight they still need the Mars bars, but they also need nuts bars because people don't want to have sandwiches. And somehow they figure out not only what people want, but exactly how much in order to maximize customer satisfaction. Very, very simple use, but very clever use of data and using machine learning for that.
This is where it becomes scary again, right? So the machine knows before you know
what you're
going
yeah, exactly, yeah.
They don't like
You're right. Oh well.
I don't know if we have another example.
Yeah, there's one more.
Yeah.
One more. This has to do with revenue management. Big topic in aviation. Revenue management is about how much do you charge for a seat in an aircraft. If you go back to the 70s, they had this idea that you sell a seat for a certain price, and then the closer you get to the date, the cheaper you make it in order to sell out. That's traditional business thinking, you know. A product expires, so you make it cheaper. Of course, customers, they knew that, and they were waiting with buying their seats at the very last minute, so everybody loses except the customer. So airlines have turned this around. Now they increase the price, as you know. The closer to departure, the more expensive it gets. Now the trick with flying an airline in the most economical way is to make sure every single seat is filled. Perhaps you want to have one single seat left just before takeoff for that businessman that's willing to pay any price. Okay, but typically they fill them up, which is why aircraft are always full. To do that, they need to understand the history of bookings for these particular flights. They need to understand how other movements in the market are influencing it, and they use revenue management. And this is typically an AI application. It's been going on for a long time, which is why most of the time your aircraft is full, and most of the time you get on. In other words, not too much overbooking, just enough to account for the no-shows. A very delicate business that, but very successfully managed. It was invented by the airlines, now it's used by other businesses, by hotels, by car rentals. Even supermarkets are experimenting with dynamic pricing for their products.
Sure. So this is just a subset. I mean, there are so many other applications, as you know. We're in constant communication with a number of technological providers or startups, and every other day we see new things, right? So it's amazing, especially some of the big corporations are opening up their brains, and their digital brains, to third parties to go and investigate.
Certain big countries are you thinking about? Certain big companies?
Certain big companies,
yeah,
of course.
So let's not mention those today.
Of course, but they're very useful business partners, and they also have this mindset of opening up and having others, creating the new big thing, right? So it's very interesting.
Anybody here does AI or machine learning, or you guys? I was talking to you earlier on. What are you doing with or what are you experimenting with? What are your thoughts about using AI for, or machine learning?
We actually did some predictive maintenance, but we also went into computer vision, into image recognition and sound recognition by turning it into images, into getting overall context with the machine learning, getting image, humans, objects, and sound into the games to get like a full context view. But it's pretty much endless what you can do with machine learning today, and as we spoke earlier, it's getting more and more from the very technical into the commodity. I think in a few years, less than 5 years, most developers will have out of the box machine learning kits in order to play around with, and so the most difficult thing will be to get hands on representative data. So,
sure.
So
but for some of it, like you mentioned, image recognition, images are easy to get, right? And an image has a lot of data, so which is why that's one area where it's evolving very fast. Because, for example, if I were to film you guys here, I would have enough data to do face recognition. Without having any other data, I could do that. But if I want to do something else, for example, I want to do some AI on traffic patterns, for example, the way that airlines are flying their aircraft, I would need a lot of data for it to be accurate. For example, you could write machine learning that could predict what traffic is going to be like in 3 years' time. But to do that, I probably need 50 years worth of data, and even that may not be enough. So you're quite right, data is a big issue. I agree that things become more and more accessible. A few years ago, you had to be an academic, you had to be a professor in AI to be able to do anything. Today, engineers can do it, technicians can do it if they study a little bit. I agree, in a few years from now, you'll find it integrated in Outlook into whatever tool you have, that you can start doing AI on your own emails, have automatic email responders that give intelligent answers. And a few years, I think we're not far from it. And at IATA we do some stuff. We look into whether we can use some of our data to do some data analysis and to start predicting trends and stuff. But very exciting area. And you know, we discuss this a lot.
Yes.
And there's another subject, blockchain, we'll get to in a minute. I think AI is one area which has a very fast return on investment. You build something, it works, you can start selling it. I think that's that's why I think it will go really fast. Some of the applications you were looking at, you can make it work and sell it. It doesn't require a whole industry to change. They're very isolated applications that can work on their own.
I agree on the data. Data is key. So some use cases are, you just plug it and it kind of works. But from more of the deep analysis, you need deep and qualitative data, right?
Yes.
And this is where it becomes tricky. So you could do it, but then you would need to have the proper standpoint. So yeah, easy and not expensive. There is some risks. Some business cases are very straightforward and people kind of get it. Some others are a bit intimidating when it comes to being replaced by a machine, or when it touches into privacy and other areas where it becomes more sensitive. Then you need to be very careful, right? But
it's all cool, right? It's cool stuff.
Yeah. And there is a lot of business cases.
Anyone else here that is thinking about AI or machine learning, or don't worry, your job is not a risk. Maybe some of the YouTubers, but of course they can't talk back to us. So what have we got here? Oh yes, VR and AR, virtual reality, augmented reality. You know, I put a photo on the left here. This is an Airbus simulator. It has to be one of the first applications of virtual reality or simulation. That's how pilots learn to fly these days. You know, that's how to learn to get their aircraft out of a difficult situation, a bad weather and things. They're not going to use a real aircraft for that. So this has to be one of the original ones, and they're extremely convincing. I've never been in one, but I'm told if you're in one and something goes wrong, you call in sick for the next week because it's fairly realistic.
Right.
But there's some other good stuff. Augmented reality. You know, you go to an airport, you have your augmented reality glasses, and it will actually inform you on the fly where you can get a good coffee, where there's a special offer on perfume and stuff like that. This is happening today. You know, this is not future technology. On the cargo side, we see augmented reality in warehouses. I believe that Amazon uses it, but I'm sure there are many others, where the person that has to sort of pick the boxes or has to store the boxes, put them on the pallets or whatever, they're just told by their glasses which box to pick and which orange box to put it inside. So they don't have to read anything. It's completely automated. It tells them, you can see the little control panel on the right there. It tells them where to pick it and where to put it, which of course, you know, reduces errors, and the chance that you get the product you ordered in your mailbox actually increases significantly. Virtual reality in airplanes, you know, this used to look cool a few years ago. I think it looks really stupid now. But I guess, you know, we'll be seeing VR, maybe slightly sexier headsets than these here. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they're doing some yoga or meditation or something. But, you know, we'll see this stuff. Here's one that I like in particular. Augmented reality in aircraft maintenance, where the aircraft engineer has his augmented reality glasses. It will tell him what tool to take and how to move it. I mean, this is not moving, but the image actually see the little hand telling him what to do. It will tell him when he takes the piece off, where they have to put lubricant, where they have to clean, where they have to check. And although the guys are obviously qualified, they're engineers, you know, they're not just people from the street, but using systems like that, they should be able to intervene in any part of the aircraft in a very safe way. So very, very exciting stuff. And at IATA, we have our own virtual reality product. It's called Ramp VR. It's about training people how to work on the ramp. The YouTubers can't see it, but we're actually in the building here looking onto the runway of Geneva Airport. And just outside, there's the tarmac where the ground handlers are moving luggage, they're moving cargo. There's people driving around with trucks. They need special training to go there because it's a very, very dangerous area. You've got big aircraft, okay, so by definition it's dangerous. So to train people, to get them on the tarmac is a big deal. You know, they need some pre-qualification, they have to be authorized, they need to be registered and everything. So we have a VR product where you just stay in the classroom, put your glasses on, and you find yourself in front of a big jumbo jet which has damage, and you have to find what the damage is. So very cool stuff. I don't know if you've tried this one, Juan.
I tried.
It's seriously very impressive when you're standing under a jumbo jet with your VR glasses on.
It's indeed very well done, and this use case again is kind of tangible. I'm more a gamer myself, so you know I'm more These are business applications, but I mostly into the
This is boring for you.
Actually, I tried this. This is not bad. I mean, you know, you isolate yourself, especially if you're in eco. This is very good because you
Then
forget
go in
it's
business.
eco. Just put it in business and you go in first. And you go first. Now, jokes apart, very interesting technologies too. I mean, these have been around for some time now. The thing is escalating. There is a lot of investments going on. So what is really helping a lot is the fact that you have more and more devices that are working. So you remember that a very big company, launched a cardboard thing that you could use around your own headset, and that really triggered a number of developments. A lot of people that saw, oh, this is something easy and tangible. I don't need to put $3,000 on the table to start doing it. I already have the device, right? So with just as simple as a piece of cardboard that costed a few bucks, you could go and do things. So the community of people throwing ideas at this is huge. These are very sophisticated airline developments, but there are so many others going on, right? And again, it's a big mega trend. We believe that this will be impacting in different parts of the industry as we go. And again, we're monitoring what's going on, and very interesting area.
Any VR, AR, or gamers here? Okay.
Gamers.
Gamers. Okay. Okay.
Well, the thing is that AR is heavily influenced by computer vision.
Yes.
Because if you want to put enhancements to your environment, you need to recognize your environment. So those are kind of the same topic
Yes.
topic to handle. And so the more computer vision will be pushed forward, the more AR will be relevant for
That's right.
any kind of job.
Which is why in this example of aircraft maintenance, it's so impressive, because the vision, the computer vision, recognizes a specific part of the engine. So it's clearly been very well trained to recognize each part, including problems. It's not the same as having some game where there's a little dragon that's running on your desk. Okay, that it's fun. It's cool. It's not so hard. This is tough stuff. But you're quite right. It's the computer vision, and the other thing you mentioned earlier applies to this too. If 5 years ago you wanted to develop these applications, you had needed an awful lot of money because there was no software available. You had to develop everything yourself. Now more and more software packages are becoming available that allow developers to use the computer vision out of the box and to be able to create forms and shapes and little puppets and whatever out of the box. So more and more this becomes available, and the more it becomes available, the more we'll see it, and the more it becomes available. So it's a self perpetuating virtuous circle.
So a few weeks back we had the car show here in Geneva, right? And as these guys using this technology to show you new prototypes. So you could walk around a car that wasn't there, right? But you could really walk and see the features and change the color. Oh, okay, it looks like this and that. And you know, if any one of you have been buying cars, how many hours you spend in the configurator changing, and then you need to go and see because you don't really get it. With this kind of technology, then you get it. Or buying a house, you can walk into the house and see, oh, just change the appliances, put some carpet here, put some wood, boom, boom, and you see it real time, you know? So it really helps in a lot of use cases to make things tangible. Yeah. This will change the way, I suppose, consumers are behaving and the expectations, right? So more and more people will be looking into these kind of applications also within our industry.
And in the workplace too. I mean, 20% of IATA stuff is virtual, right? I mean, we're not actually.
You're an AI.
That's right.
All right. Yes, please.
There is another term.
Could you cut that out of the YouTube? I don't want the other colleagues to see that.
We have another question. Yes.
It's not a question, but another comment. We had a meeting not long ago with the IBM, and they were talking about another term, which is diminishing reality,
okay.
Which is very interesting. Which is this is a company. There's another company based in Geneva, which they isolate all the objects, and you can also move them from the picture or move them around.
Okay.
So it's a new.
What did you call that? I missed the term.
Diminishing reality.
Diminishing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Diminishing?
Diminishing.
Okay.
So it's
well,
basically
you clean up your house.
exactly.
And
so there is a lot of applications. Actually, there is
someone's not gonna like it.
Oh, I like it
so
already.
there is the Room to Go company, which is the US based, similar to IKEA, that they are using that. So they go to your house, they take a 360 picture of the room, and they are able to isolate the objects, and then you can move them around
Oh,
in the virtual
And
room.
virtually tidy up
Exactly.
your.
And a company here in Geneva that they are focusing that a lot into the filming industry. So a lot of big
That's
filming.
pretty
very good, very good.
I really like. I don't know if any Star Wars fans here. I'm the geek, so you know. But I love this thing where you can do teleconference and you take the thing like Princess Leia and you can put it in the table and you can walk around. When all those things are dramatically changing the way you do conferencing or you interact with people, especially when you have teams like we do.
Yeah,
that are
the virtual team.
Exactly. Please.
Something which is perhaps not so demanding in terms of virtual reality, but is windowless aircraft. So you can build aircraft without windows, which saves a lot of weight because the structural reinforcements of the window frame is quite heavy, and you could replace it by a projection of what you would see outside.
Beach.
You have the cameras today, but normally they are not of very good quality. And even if it's cloudy outside, you could project the picture of the landscape at sunshine.
That's a good idea. I mean, you already have the the Dreamliner, where you have the blinds, which are electronic.
Electrochromic.
Electrochromic. There you go. I've learned a new word today. But no, yeah, why not? We could have that here, right? We could have another building and still see the runway, which would be kind of nice. But we see the real thing. So. Okay.
If you've seen Blade Runner,
you know
the
things
latest,
we don't know. We have to cut that out as well.
Yeah, I've seen that in a movie recently. So yeah, it's a good idea. So let's move on to the last one. Last but not least, the blockchain. So yeah, I mean we've been talking about it for some time. So there is still a lot of hype. There is a lot of people still that do not really understand what it is, and that's all good. But we're also starting to see more and more use cases that are more tangible, and this is great. Within our scope in the financial and distribution services, certainly there is a big interest around this area. You've seen banks and financial institutions and payment providers looking into this very closely, right? Because it could come as a disruptor, or maybe now that we say, well, could it also become part of the opportunities, right? So there is a number of potential use cases. We're not going to cover all of them, but within IATA, we're testing a number of them, right? So we've been looking for some time at the cryptocurrency thing. So we created the IATA Coin back in 2014. So, and
it's worth $5 million now.
Yeah, we're billionaires, but we come to work anyway. So you know, and this use case that now we have so many different cryptocurrencies, but it kind of has sense to a certain extent. It lacks the problem. It's that it lacks a homogeneous, you know, legal and taxation and accounting framework, right? So some governments, some regionals are supportive, and you have clear legislations, like within Switzerland. We have clearly the FINMA released mid of January a very clear set of rules you can refer to. So it kind of helps, but in other regions it's not necessarily the case, which doesn't help to an organization ourselves where we're aiming at launching global standards and solutions. If we roll out something in 170 countries, we need to make sure that it's legal, of course, and it's according to the rules. So this is where we need to wait a little bit to this technology still at its infancy to be clearer to more.
But there's a lot of interest. I mean,
there is a lot of interest.
There's a lot of interest both from within industry and outside the industry, because, as I said, this represents 10% of the global economy, the tourism and travel. So it's globalized. There's money flowing around. In terms of freight, I mean, I think we didn't put the number up there, but a third of the global freight in terms of value, of all freight, of all modes, whether it's by truck or by boat or by air, a third in terms of value is going by air. So that's an awful lot of value being transported.
Sure.
So when people think that, they think blockchain immediately, value, blockchain, trust. And one of the challenges we have here, and myself and Juana, we're very, very involved in this, is trying to understand where are the real applications. Because there is so much hype. I mean, people come to you and propose you a blockchain to make pizzas or something like that. And there's a lot of stuff, maybe not pizzas, but equally stupid. But it sounds good, right? So you can sell it to your customer. And we somehow have to make the difference between what sounds good and what is good. And that's a ton of, and you mentioned, you know, we're experimenting or playing around with payments, cross-border payments, clearinghouse, even financing. Why not? You know, there's financing via blockchain. We're looking at, you know, why couldn't you sell a ticket over blockchain, for example? Pay the blockchain, get the ticket, do the reservation, do some automatic bidding to find the best flight, things like that are being played around with, thought about, experimented with. And on the freight side, similarly, of course, we have identity management. Imagine that you had a blockchain with your identity and you didn't have to carry a passport anymore going around the world. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but this industry is looking at it. We have frequent flyer programs. It's a huge business for airlines. Actually, it's a huge business for frequent flyer programs, which are often owned by airlines, sometimes they're not. But to your point, you can have coins that maybe you could exchange with other frequent flyer programs, or maybe you can cash them in or something. Some success around aircraft maintenance and repair, overhaul, where you use a blockchain to track every piece that's going in the airplane, so that if there's a manufacturing default somewhere, you know exactly where that piece went, in which aircraft and where it is. And so it leads to a lot of traceability and trackability, which increases safety, which is the number one priority. Won't go through all of the others, but there's stuff around freight that people are experimenting with. But to be honest, every single one you see on the screen, and most of the ones that you hear about, are proofs of concept. There are very, very few real blockchains that are actually operating today. The only ones that are operating are things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything to do with cryptocurrency. But on the use case and the application side, it's mostly playing around. Unless somebody in the room here knows a blockchain application that's actually operational. Who knows a blockchain application that's not operational? Yes, you know one.
Well, there are plenty of them. We've seen like at Web Summit, for instance, we've been there last year.
Mm-hmm.
There are smart contracts, there are like car rentals, etc. So there are plenty on the market. Now,
Are they working? Or they're playing around with them?
They are using them. They are using them in production. Yes.
Okay.
The big question is what is the added value? The added value to it. It's in production.
Yeah.
The question is, does it really add some added value? Because if you're a car rental customer today and you can go to one car rental company that does it with blockchain and one that does it without, would you care? If you say yes, then they will probably be there in 5 years. If you say no, their blockchain has just been a hype, and I haven't seen a lot of concrete production that really made sense to this extent. So if you don't have any issues with counterfeit or with traceability or with transparency, blockchain will maybe boost your sales over 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, for marketing reasons.
Yes.
Right. Well, I agree with you. At the same time, would you agree that you still need to, we need to do more work to find out where the value might be? Because your example of the car rental, the actual blockchain may not add much value. What if you start doing smart contracts on top and maybe link it to financing or other things or frequent flyer programs or whatever?
My question is, do you have a lot of counterfeit or a lot of traceability or similar issues with frequent flyer? Well, my question was on frequent flyer.
Okay.
You wouldn't really care that much if you had to pay more for it. Would you do it, or would an organization pay more because it's blockchain? Because on a frequent flyer,
when you say pay more, would it cost more?
Well, whether it's pay or cost more, it would cost more because you're using more energy for the same purpose,
right.
And you would have complexity where none is needed. So, that's a personal opinion, of course, but I would see blockchain as an overkill in that specific area.
I would agree with you.
So you need to find the right business case.
Yes.
So I will challenge a bit, Henk, but I've seen a few blockchains that can afford. Kind of work. So there is
Do they add value?
There is a very good one that is tracing.
Do they add value?
They do add value, and they're making money. So there is one to the point of the counterfeit and the traceability, and that is tracking diamonds, for instance, right?
Yeah.
And doing great. And they found a very interesting spot where, and they are really leading this because they really found a way to do traceability, guarantee where the diamond is coming. It's just not a blood diamond and these kind of things. So it's great. And a lot of people, when they are in the diamond business, they are recognizing and using this, and they're willing to pay for that, right? So some use cases count. Some others, I agree there. For me, there are three types. So one is the cryptocurrency. There are a lot of cryptocurrencies, and we don't go into the speculative value of them, but we have plenty of them. So you can open any wallet and have 30, 50 of them as we speak in different location shapes and forms, and people are using them. If this adds value or not, some of them make a lot of money, some of them lose, but it's there. There is a lot of people using let's say, commodity tokens, right? So how it represents something, the right or used to. And these are kind of popping up now, and some people kind of see value, and comes to your example. They need to still find a place. Sometimes they are hybrid with the previous ones, right? But the third ones, those are booming, right? So the ones that are representing assets, right? So the famous ICO, the initial coin offerings, where instead of going and doing an IPO and selling shares of your company, you do an ICO where you give digital shares. These are booming. Again, those are not regulated. A lot of them might be just speculating. Good, but it's there. And to my view, maybe I'm a bit romantic on this, but it's democratizing a lot, the fact that a lot of people can now access to the market. So I don't know, you spend money in things like Quickstarter and things like that. It's very similar in a sense. No? You can go very early stage into cool ideas of people, share some money, and then potentially get a return on your investment, because this is very early stage. The option is going through a financial institution, doing the proper IPO in this case, spend a lot of money, and it's regulated. Maybe it's more secure, even though there are some scams over there too. So this thing is not going away. It's coming, it's happening. I think between those three use cases, there is a lot of hybrids popping up. So I can give you something that is an asset and a token and a crypto face value thing. Cool. I think today, a lot of what we're seeing, it's hype, but there are still some things that work. And this is what we're trying to monitor and figure out.
But that's the challenge, isn't it? Is to tell one from the other, and we can't tell yet. In some cases, we need to go further and further. Regulations, they will come. Maybe they will kill it, maybe they will enable it, but it's to be evolved. Yes.
Yeah. The thing is, I was not speaking about blockchain in general. I was just saying certain examples I've seen live on bringing added value. I completely agree that the diamonds example is a fabulous example of blockchain. And if you look at consent or at other things that are not changing, it is a great tool. The question is not whether it's a great tool or not. It's just, have we seen, the question you asked was, have we seen added value out of the use cases that are in production so far?
Yeah.
And I haven't seen them. We are also working on prototypes where we think it gives added value in the healthcare industry with consent. And consent is something that will not change, and it's the fourth category for me, is the traceability need for certain elements. And this is, the case of the diamonds as well, and it's a very strong use case. But I haven't seen one in production yet, and I would love to hear about examples other than the diamonds.
Well, in air freight,
it's very, very interesting.
Yeah. In air freight, there's a very big use case in exactly that area, which is for customs. Customs want to know exactly where certain goods come from. So they're tracking the origin of goods for different reasons. Sometimes it's to make sure that there's no counterfeit and all of these things, but it can also be for something as mundane as VAT payments. Today, the VAT collectors miss about 10% of revenue. I don't know if you have any concept of what 10% of VAT represents, but it's enough to keep your country going for a few years. It's an enormous amount of money. Now, what if you can actually track VAT all the way from manufacturer to the end customer? All of a sudden, VAT fraud would be finished. So what some governments are doing, and customs working together, is developing VAT blockchains. And when they do this, and when it's operational, the money they make with that will fund any other electronic government project they can ever think of. So you might find that something as mundane as VAT might turn out to be one of the killer applications for blockchain. But not yet today. Same point. All right.
So wait and see.
Wait and see. Any other blockchain stories? War stories? Any blockchain billionaires in the room by any chance? No. We don't know yet, do we?
Is it worth buying
I haven't checked.
IATA Coin?
Sorry, we cannot answer that question. All right, so before we close, we just would like to invite you to participate in this little survey. Of course, after we have a cocktail, so we can talk a bit more. So if you would like to participate, you can use your devices. and go to Slido, so slide.to.
And whatever you do, don't type 215. Type R215.
Oh,
It's an R missing.
indeed. And with that, we also invite YouTubers, our YouTube viewers, to please also participate, if you will, in the survey. This is for us like very like rule of thumb. What do you think? Which technologies will have the greatest impact in aviation? Blockchain, artificial intelligence, VR, AR, drones, quantum computing. We didn't cover that
This
one.
is actually working.
It's a pretty cool one. 3D printing, alternative means of transport, big data, or sharing economy. Right? So, you know, there is probably a subset of the 36 I showed you at the beginning. It will be interesting for us to capture your gut feel, and maybe very qualified input. These will be used for subsequent sessions to kind of deep dive into
Can we
some
show
of
the
the
slide out, the results?
We could, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you have them somewhere on the...
So it's working, right?
It's working, yeah.
Let's give them a few minutes and we'll share that with you.
Okay. I guess I could be like a sports commentator on the radio. So AI is winning as a lead over big data. Ah, no, they've just caught up. Oh, I see quantum computing. We didn't talk about quantum computing.
Ooh, good.
I don't suppose there's any quantum computers in the room here.
If you want to vote twice, you need to change the IP. But
Yeah. We've done many Slido sessions, and there are many ways to trick them, but not the polls.
not the false.
The polls are more difficult. Okay, well, I mean, AI, we've had 12 responses so far. AI is actually half the room and half the YouTubers think that AI is the number one. Big data is the second
Big data.
one. We didn't talk about that, did
Very
we?
much related. No, we didn't. But it's certainly very much
Anybody
related.
works on big data here?
Yep.
Big data.
You guys, okay. So maybe an interesting topic for our next deep dive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll share that with you. We'll distribute the slides to all the participants. Probably we can also put a link on the YouTube so people can access the slides. And we'll change this slide with the results of the survey. Thank you very much for your time. I think this is one of many, as we said. Thank you for our YouTube viewers too. If you like the video, just click there. You know,
Like
it works.
this, somewhere over there.
So thank you very much.
No, not that one, the other one. Yeah, okay.
Thank you guys.
All right, cheers, thank you.